Some fighters are great. Others are legendary. And then there are those who leave us wondering, what if Salvador Sanchez was one of boxing's brightest stars? A prodigy whose talent seemed limitless. A world champion. By 21, he possessed lightning-fast combinations, impeccable footwork, and an unshakable presence in the ring. He defeated legends, dominated his division, and appeared destined for all-time greatness. But at just 23 years old, tragedy struck a fatal car accident, ended his life at the height of his career, leaving behind one of the greatest unanswered questions in boxing history. How far could he have gone? What more could he have achieved? This is the story of Salvador Sanchez, the champion taken too soon, the fighter whose legacy still echoes through time. Salvador Sanchez was born on January 26, 1959, in Santiago Tianguistenco, Mexico, a small town where life was tough and opportunities were few. Growing up in a modest family, he was surrounded by hard work and perseverance. From an early age, Sanchez showed an interest in boxing, inspired by the great Mexican warriors who came before him. In Mexico, boxing wasn't just a sport. It was a way of life, a path to something greater. By the age of 10, Sanchez began training seriously, while most children his age were occupied with school and daily chores. He was already honing his skills in the gym, learning the fundamentals of movement, defense, and power. What set him apart was his natural ability, a rare blend of speed, precision, and mental toughness. Few possessed at such a young age. He studied legendary Mexican fighters, developing a style that combined technical mastery with relentless aggression. Coaches quickly recognized that he was special. Unlike many future champions, Sanchez did not have an extensive amateur career. Instead, at just 16 years old, he made the bold decision to turn professional, a move that was virtually unheard of for someone so young. It was a massive gamble. Most fighters spend years building experience as amateurs before making the leap to the professional ranks. But Sanchez and those around him knew that his talent was too great to be wasted on the amateur circuit. His professional debut came in 1975, and it didn't take long for the boxing world to take notice. Fighting well. Beyond his years, Sanchez quickly rose through the ranks of the featherweight division, showcasing a level of skill and composure. Far beyond his teenage years, he was a tactician in the ring, blending precise counterpunching with fluid movement, making him a nightmare for opponents who underestimated him. As Sanchez continued to build his record, his reputation spread beyond Mexico, drawing the attention of international boxing fans and promoters. His dominance in the ring was undeniable. Unlike other young fighters who relied solely on aggression and power, he displayed a maturity and patience that set him apart. He didn't rush his knockouts. He broke opponents down methodically, using his footwork, angles, and speed to control every second of a fight. By the late 1970s, Sanchez was more than just a rising star. He was a true contender. He had racked up an impressive number of wins and was beginning to position himself for a shot at the world title. But despite his growing fame, he remained humble, dedicated, and focused. Boxing wasn't about money or glory for him. It was about proving himself, about pushing his limits, and etching his name into the sport's history. It was clear to those who followed his career closely, Salvador Sanchez was destined for something extraordinary. The only question was how far he could go. The answer would come soon enough as he prepared to take on the best in the world and claim his place among boxing's elite. By 1979, Salvador Sanchez had established himself as one of the most exciting young fighters in the featherweight division. He had amassed an undefeated record in 30 fights, proving that his decision to turn professional at such a young age had been the right one. With every victory, his confidence grew, and so did the demand for him to challenge for a world title. The opportunity finally came on February 2nd, 1980, when he was given a shot at the WBC Featherweight Championship. The reigning champion was Danny Little Red Lopez, an American fighter known for his explosive punching power and relentless aggression. Lopez was a dominant champion who had successfully defended his title. 8 times had built a reputation as one of the toughest fighters in the division. Many believed that Sanchez, despite his impressive record, was too young and inexperienced to dethrone such a seasoned champion. But Sanchez was ready. From the opening bell, he displayed a level of poise and skill that shocked the boxing world. While Lopez charged forward with his signature aggression, Sanchez remained calm, calculating and precise. His footwork was flawless, allowing him to evade Lopez's wild attacks while landing crisp counters. As the rounds went on, it became clear that Lopez had never faced an opponent like Sanchez. Round after round, Sanchez picked him apart. His timing was impeccable. His combinations were lightning fast, and his ability to roll the pace of the fight was masterful. By the 13th round, Lopez was battered and exhausted, with one final onslaught of punches. Sanchez overwhelmed him, forcing the referee to step in and stop the fight. At just 21 years old, Salvador Sanchez was the new WBC featherweight champion. The victory was more than just a title win. It was a statement to the boxing world. Sanchez had not only beaten a great champion, but he had done so in dominant fashion. Mexico had a new boxing hero, and the featherweight division had a new king. Rather than celebrating for too long, Sanchez quickly set his sights on proving that his victory was no fluke. Later that year, he granted Lopez an immediate rematch, giving the former champion a chance at redemption. But once again, Sanchez showcased his superiority. If the first fight was a statement, the second was a confirmation. Salvador Sanchez was here to stay after another dominant performance. Sanchez stopped Lopez in the 14th round, silencing any doubters who still questioned his legitimacy as champion. His flawless technique, stamina, and composure under pressure had won over fans. Worldwide, a new era in the featherweight division had begun, and Sanchez was leading it with 2 title defenses under his belt. He had firmly established himself as one of the best fighters in the world, but his journey was far from over. Bigger challenges awaited, and soon he would find himself stepping into the ring against one of the most feared knockout artists in the sport. The summer of 1981, Salvador Sanchez had already proven himself as one of the most skilled and disciplined featherweight champions in the world. But his next challenge would be unlike anything he had faced before on August 21st, 1981. He stepped into the ring against Wilfredo Gomez, an undefeated Puerto Rican superstar with an aura of invincibility. This was more than just a title fight. It was a battle between 2 nations, showdown between 2 of the most gifted fighters of their era, and a defining moment in Sanchez's career. Gomez was not just another contender. He was a knockout artist of historic proportions. Entering the fight, he held a staggering record of 32 wins. 32 knockouts, making him one of the most feared punchers in boxing history. He had completely dominated the super bantamweight division, defending his WBC title, an astonishing 13 times, all by knockout. Now moving up to featherweight, Gomez was confident that his power would be too much for Sanchez to handle most experts, and fans agreed Gomez was the heavy favorite. The build-up to the fight was intense, with tensions running high between the Mexican and Puerto Rican fan bases. Homer never one to shy away from trash talk publicly, dismissed Sanchez's abilities, predicting an easy victory. But behind his quiet and reserved demeanor, Sanchez was prepared for the biggest night of his life. From the opening bell, it became clear that the boxing world had underestimated San Gomez. Known for his aggressive starts, rushed forward, looking for an early knockout. But instead of folding under the pressure, Gomez countered with pinpoint precision, landing a perfectly timed right hand, sent Gomez crashing to the canvas in the first. Round the stunned crowd roared as Gomez, for the first time in his career, found himself in serious trouble. Despite getting back to his feet, Gomez never truly recovered. Sanchez executed a master class in technical boxing, using his exceptional footwork, head movement, and counterpunching to systematically break Gomez down, while Gomez was used to overwhelming opponents with his power. Sanchez was different. He stayed composed, absorbed. Gomez's best shots and continued to land, clean punishing counters as the rounds went on. The momentum shifted entirely in Sanchez's favor. He controlled the pace of the fight, forcing Gomez into exchanges that favored the Mexican champion's superior boxing IQ. Gomez growing desperate, threw wild punches. But Sanchez evaded them with ease, and made him pay with precise, calculated counters. By the 8th round, Gomez was battered, exhausted, and completely outclassed, with Gomez trapped against the ropes. Sanchez unleashed a relentless combination, landing brutal shots that left Gomez defenseless. The referee had seen enough and stepped in, waving off the fight, awarding Sanchez a stunning 8th round TKO victory. It was more than just another title defense. It was one of the greatest performances in boxing history. Salvador Sanchez had not only beaten Wilfredo Gomez, he had dismantled him. So-called invincible knockout artist had been exposed, humiliated, and sent back to the super bantamweight division, never to challenge. At featherweight again with this win, Sanchez silenced every remaining doubter he had taken on an undefeated legend, a man who had terrorized an entire division, and he had made it look effortless. This was the moment that transformed Salvador Sanchez from a rising star into a once-in-a-generation fighter. A champion whose name would be forever etched in boxing history after his career, defining victory over Wilfredo Gomez. Salvador Sanchez stood at the top of the featherweight division, was no longer just a champion. He was an icon, but rather than bask in his success, Sanchez remained as focused as ever, determined to continue proving himself against the best. Over the next year, he would defend his WBC featherweight title 9 times, solidifying his legacy as one of the greatest fighters of his era. Each defense further showcased his incredible ring, IQ, stamina, and ability to adapt. He was a master of adjusting his style. Mid-fight, effortlessly, switching between offense and defense to break down opponents with every victory. He built a resume that was already rivaling some of the greatest Mexican boxers in history, but the last fight of his career would be one of the most memorable and one of the toughest on July 21st, 1982. Sanchez faced Azuma Nelson, an unknown but highly skilled fighter from Ghana. At the time, Nelson was a late replacement for another challenger and had very little experience at the world-class level. Many expected Sanchez to win easily, but what unfolded that night was one of the most grueling battles of his career. Nelson was young, hungry, and fearless. He came forward, aggressively pushing Sanchez in ways few had done before, while the Mexican champion had faced legends like Wilfredo Gomez. Nelson's relentless style and awkward movement created an entirely new challenge. Sanchez found himself in a true war, forced to dig deep to withstand the pressure. But as he had done so many times before, Sanchez proved why he was a champion. As the fight wore on, he adapted, figuring out Nelson's rhythm and landing more punishing shots by the later rounds. Nelson was badly fatigued, his punches losing steam while Sanchez remained composed and relentless, finally in the 15th. Round, Sanchez delivered the finishing blows with Nelson unable to defend himself. The referee stepped in to stop the fight, awarding Sanchez a dramatic TKO victory. It would be the last time the world would see Salvador Sanchez fight at just 23 years old. He had achieved more than most fighters do in an entire career. He had faced legends, conquered them, and remained undefeated as champion. But despite his success, there was a sense that he was only getting started. Many believed he would go on to become one of the greatest pound-for-pound fighters of all time. There were whispers of dream fights against Alexis, Arguello, Julio Cesar Chavez, and even a move up to the lightweight division to chase further glory. But none of those fights would ever happen less than 3 weeks after his victory over Azuma Nelson tragedy struck on August 12th, 1982. The world lost one of boxing's brightest stars in a horrific car accident. Sanchez was driving his Porsche 928 along the highway in Mexico in the early morning hours around 5 a.m. While traveling at high speed, he lost control of the vehicle and crashed into a truck. The impact was devastating. Salvador Sanchez, the reigning featherweight champion of the world, was killed instantly. News of his death sent shockwaves through the boxing world. Just 23 years old at the peak of his career, he was gone. Fans, fellow fighters, and boxing analysts struggled to comprehend the sudden and tragic loss. How could someone so young, so talented, and with so much ahead of him be taken so soon in Mexico? Mourning spread across the nation. Sanchez was not just a champion. He was a national treasure. A fighter who had embodied everything that Mexican boxing stood for. Thousands attended his funeral, paying their respects to a fighter who had given them so much pride in such a short time. Boxing legends, promoters, and even political figures expressed their sorrow, recognizing that the sport had lost someone truly special. Sanchez's death left behind one of the greatest unanswered questions in boxing history. What could he have achieved had he lived? Could he have become the greatest featherweight of all time? Would he have moved up in weight and conquered more divisions the world will never know? But what remains undeniable is the impact he had in the short time he was here. In just 3 years as a world champion, Salvador Sanchez left a legacy that fighters with decades-long careers could only dream of. His technical brilliance, his unshakable composure, and his warrior spirit will forever be remembered. Though his life was cut short, his legend will never fade. When Salvador Sanchez died at just 23 years old, the boxing world was left with one of the greatest unanswered questions in the sport's history. What more could he have achieved? He was already an undisputed champion, had defeated legends, and showed no signs of slowing down. Skill-level composure and adaptability made him one of the most complete fighters of his era. Had he lived, he could have been the greatest Mexican boxer of all time. At the time of his passing, Sanchez was already eyeing new challenges. He had conquered the featherweight division, and many believed it was only a matter of time before he moved up in weight to chase even greater glory. His crisp, technical style meant he would have been a threat in multiple weight classes, just as Roberto Duran and Sugar Ray Leonard had done before him. One of the biggest tragedies of Sanchez's early death was the super fights that never happened, but that could have redefined boxing history and cemented his place as one of the all-time greats. One of the most anticipated dream fights that never came to fruition was a showdown between Sanchez and Alexis. Arguello, a 3-division world, champion from Nicaragua, was regarded as one of the greatest punchers and technicians in the sport. A fight between the two would have been a masterpiece of skill and precision. Chess match between two of boxing's most cerebral fighter. The contrast in styles, Arguello's deadly straight punches against Sanchez's slick movement and counterpunching, could have produced one of the greatest fights of all time. Another potential historic fight would have been a clash with Julio Cesar Chavez. At the time of Sanchez's death, Chavez was still an up-and-coming fighter, but within a few years he would establish himself as Mexico's greatest boxing icon. Fight between Sanchez and Chavez would have been the biggest, all-Mexican showdown in history, a battle for national pride that would have captivated the country. Many experts debate who would have won Sanchez's technical prowess and stamina, or Chavez's relentless pressure and body punching. Sadly, we will never know beyond. These legendary matchups, a rematch with Hazuma Nelson, was another possibility. Nelson, who was an unknown challenger at the time of their first fight, would go on to become a legend in his own right, dominating the featherweight and super featherweight divisions for years. The second fight between the two would have been a major event, with Nelson now having the experience and confidence to pose an even greater threat to Sanchez. Would Sanchez have won again? Or would Nelson have avenged his loss? The world was robbed of the answer. Salvador Sanchez's short career was filled with achievements that many fighters never reach in a lifetime. He had already beaten a future Hall of Famer in Wilfredo Gomez, defended his title 9 times, and remained dominant against every challenger. Had he lived, there is little doubt that he would have moved up in weight and continued his dominance. Would he have surpassed Julio Cesar Chavez, Ricardo Lopez, or even Canelo Alvarez in the conversation of Mexico's greatest fighter? Many believe he would have his combination of technical perfection, ring intelligence, and unwavering composure made him a generational talent, even though his career was tragically cut short. Sanchez remains one of Mexico's most beloved champions. His influence can still be seen today, inspiring young fighters to embrace the discipline and brilliance that made him so special. Fighters and fans alike still revere his style, his achievements, and the legacy he left behind, though we will never know how far Salvador Sanchez could have gone. His impact on boxing remains immortal. He was a champion, a warrior, and a legend who left the world too soon, but whose name will forever be etched in the history of the sport.